Beck, we thank you so much for staying with the team here on SA Today. Now, one of the biggest questions about government's effort to help business that are struggling during the COVID-19 pandemic is whether the programs can really prevent bankruptcy or perhaps keeping a short-term shock from turning into a drawn-out economic downturn. Highly indebted companies that employ hundreds of people are largely left out of the major direct relief options. But for more on this now, let us speak to the NEF's Divisional Executive responsible for venture capital and corporate finance, Hlengiwe Makhathini, who joins me now live via Skype. Hlengiwe, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the SABC News channel.
Good afternoon, Palisa, and thank you so much for having the NEF this afternoon.
Thank you so much indeed for coming through. So, your entity aims to promote BEE in the country by promoting investment. So, let's just talk firstly about what NEF does in terms of mitigating the scourge of this COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you so much. So the NEF, as you've correctly said, Palisa, our focus is really to support Black businesses to grow their businesses, to start their businesses, and to also transform white-owned businesses. And during, when this pandemic came and the lockdown happened, we saw a lot of struggles from our clients. Only 25% of the investees of the NEF were able to continue operations during the hard lockdown. And as the lockdown was, softened, more were able to operate. But obviously, because they were not generating revenues for those months, their businesses were in real trouble. Most of them didn't have cash reserves to see them through. And as the NEF, we then had to come up with a various number of solutions to help investees or clients of the NEF to actually, go through this difficult time and remain sustainable post the lockdown and hopefully the pandemic.
So talk to us about those intervention programs that you're referring to. So you say that 25% of your clients and investees were still operational. What about the 75%, and how did you come about assisting those?
So the 75% were obviously, not working at all. So what we had to do, we had to analyze to see, in our portfolio, who has some reserves, who will be able to take care of the bare necessities in terms of, paying for utilities, paying for rent, paying for salaries, and what else can we do to make sure that all our investees are okay. So those who didn't have any reserves at all and who were not generating any revenues, we had to, come up with solutions like giving them payment holidays. So, we gave them 3 to 6 months payment holidays. And then we also came up with what we call the critical needs fund to make sure that the important things like insurance, rental, utilities are paid for. We also assisted our clients to actually, apply for other incentives like the UIF grants or scheme, which help to make sure that they're still able to pay their employees the salaries. But we also then partnered with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, where they allocated 200 million rand to the NEF to actually also support businesses that, had to help in responding to the pandemic. So businesses that are manufacturers of various products that were needed as essential products to respond to the pandemic.
So which sectors are you taking care of? Really interested in your informal sectors like your hair salons, your spaza shops and so on, because we do know that many businesses were strained and others even had to shut down. So in terms of your informal sectors, what specifically or which businesses were you taking care of?
So we're taking care of all of our clients, from the smallest in our portfolio to the biggest, because for us, what was very critical is actually the preservation of jobs. When we looked at our portfolio, the hardest hit sector was the tourism sector, because even now, although it has opened, there's still a number of restrictions, and it's very difficult for those businesses. So the solutions had to respond to all the clients that we have in the sector. In our portfolio. So from the smallest client who is, producing small things. And to the biggest client, we had to come up with solutions for them. So for the smaller guys, the people who run service stations, although they were operational, the volumes were much, much lower than what they were used to. So we then had to, assist them to say, how do we make sure that they get some level of working capital to keep their businesses afloat until everything is back to normal and they can generate their revenues and, pump the volumes of fuel that they are used to. So our response had to be holistic because it was about job preservation and making sure that those businesses are sustainable beyond the lockdown.
And one industry that's very concerned about jobs preservations is your hospitality industry. We do know that, of course, there are a number of concerns now, especially with the ban on alcohol and tobacco sales. What interventions have you put in place in that regard in terms of your hospitality sector?
So for our hospitality clients, we made sure that we help them to apply for the UIF TERS to make sure that their employees continue being paid. But, the reality is that some of the clients, are not up to date with the UIF. So we had to come up with other solutions to say, beyond the pandemic, will your business afford to be able to pay some level of loans so that we can then give you some soft loans to make sure that the employees are taken care of. So we provided some critical needs funding even to our hospitality businesses because as you are correctly saying, they have, had it very hard.
All right. So just very, very quickly, for a person watching this interview and would love to make an application for this relief, how do they go about doing it?
So the NEF website, has a lot of information. The current funding that we have at the moment is currently focused on the investees that are already in the NF, portfolio. Okay. But we are working very hard with government to come up with a bigger, fund which will respond to the needs of the many SMEs because we understand that lots of SMEs are negatively affected and they really need the help. So we are working very closely with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition to actually, get more funds to try and respond to the distress needs of the businesses that are out there.
All right. So we thank you so much for coming through. Hlengiwe Makhathini is the National Empowerment Fund's Divisional Executive responsible for venture capital and corporate finance, talking to us about what the NEF does in terms of helping its clients and investees in these times of the COVID-19 pandemic.